Welcome to Her Discovered Power, the podcast where we try to provide every single good-hearted woman tools and knowledge that can empower and free you from so many of the emotional aspects that impact you most, from our earliest teachings and societal implications. I'm Dave Jones with Captive Coaching and Empowerment, and this is my mission and my passion because of what I've seen happen with the women in my life, including my own mother. We're here to help you be the she that you were meant to be. Hope you follow us, hope you share us, and hope you enjoy the episode.
Well, good morning, David, and welcome back, everyone, to Her Discovered Power. Today, we're talking about something that I think many women carry quietly, and it shapes their lives. We're going to talk about regret. Not the dramatic regret that everyone talks about, but this is the kind of regret that you tend to keep to yourself. These are moments that we replay in our head. It's decisions that we second guess, or maybe relationships that we stayed in too long. It could even be the opportunities that we didn't take, or times that we didn't speak up when we wanted to. And if you're anything like me, it can show up as a disappointed whisper. You should have known better. I'm Sherry, and with me to help us navigate these emotions is our host, David Jones, who is a personal development coach with Captive Coaching and Empowerment. David, let's get into today's topic.
Well, thanks, Sherry. And as always, thanks for doing this with me. Sherry, this is a powerful one because regret is really one of the most painful emotions for good-hearted people. But as usual, good-hearted women, I think, experience it so much more and so much more deeply because they don't just feel regret. They internalize it. They turn it into a story about their worth, their goodness, and their identity.
So, David, when we talk about regret, I think many assume it's about wishing maybe we had made a different choice. But what you're saying here is that it's deeper. It's something underneath that.
It is. It's not only that wish that we made a different decision, it is applying the self-blame that we'll talk about as a result of that decision. And it goes way deeper. And when women talk about regret, it is an emotional kind of coat that they wear.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, I have to remind myself so it's not meant to be a punishment though, right?
Regret is that emotional connection, Sherry, between who we were and who or where we are now. It's the moment our present self looks back at a past version of ourselves and says, I would never choose that today. But the truth of the matter is regret is not proof that we failed. Regret is proof that we tried. And now we have to acknowledge that we would have, previously done differently, but we have to address of how it has impacted us now.
Hmm. That gives me anxiety. I mean, I feel that. I have to remind myself of that all the time. So it's not meant to punish us.
Yeah, exactly. Regret really only shows up when we're a different person or who has new information that would have informed us differently, often making us feel like we should have known better or been able to do better by seeing the unseeable. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So what does that create? I'm thinking the emotional pain that regret can create. Because in my experience, we don't just regret the decision. We replay it, analyze it from every angle, and carry it long after other people have probably moved on.
Absolutely, we do. Good-hearted people really feel regret differently than perhaps those who focus really only on themselves. They don't just regret the choice, like you said, they regret the impact. They regret the possibility that someone else got hurt. They regret not knowing what they couldn't have known previously, but we still apply it to ourselves in our current self. They regret not being stronger or clearer or braver or more aware. And because they care so deeply, good-hearted women, then turn regret into self-blame. And all good-hearted people do this, Sherry, but again, good-hearted women do it more.
Mm. So, what you're saying is we expect our past selves to have access to all the knowledge and wisdom that we have today.
Yeah. A good-hearted woman will often hold herself accountable for things she didn't cause, couldn't control, or didn't understand at the time. She'll say things like, I should have seen it. I should have left sooner. I should have spoken up. I should have protected myself, or I should have known better, like you said before. But she couldn't have, right? She didn't feel she had the identity or the authority or the knowledge she has now. And since we didn't have today's knowledge, how could we have done differently?
Mm. I bet that resonates with a lot of women, and that's probably why regret can feel so heavy because we're not looking back at a time to when we didn't care. We're looking back to a time when we were doing the best we could, but we didn't know what we know now. So I'm thinking it's not the decision itself that's causing pain, it's the gap,
Yeah.
right, between who we were and who we are.
Yeah. Regret, Sherry, is the bruise left behind when a woman finally becomes the version of herself she needed back then, or again, looking at who she could have been or what she could have done if she had the new knowledge that we have today.
Still sounds really heavy.
Well, it is. Let me give you an image that really kind of captures the kind of regret that cuts the deepest, okay?
Mhm.
The regret that comes from a decision that we made with the best information we had, the best intentions we held, and the best versions of ourselves we were at the time. And yet the damage still happened. Imagine a woman standing at the edge of a wide river. On her side of the river is everything she knows, her history, her patterns, her fears, even her responsibilities. On the other side is something she deeply wants. Maybe it's safety, maybe it's love, opportunity, healing, a new life, or maybe to help others. But the river's too deep to wade through, too wide to jump, too dangerous to swim. So she does what any wise, thoughtful, good hearted woman would do. She builds a bridge, Sherry.
Okay.
She studies the river. She gathers the strongest wood that she can find. She measures twice. She builds carefully. She checks the structure. She tests the weight. She does everything right, quote unquote. And when the bridge is finished, she steps onto it with hope. Not with recklessness, not with ignorance, not with denial, but with hope. But halfway across, the bridge gives way. Not because she was careless, not because she ignored red flags, not because she was naive, but because there were forces she couldn't see. Currents beneath the surface, weaknesses in the wood she had no way of knowing, storms that came without warning. So she falls, she gets hurt, and she pulls herself out of the water soaked and shaken, and she looks back at the broken pieces of the bridge and feels that familiar ache. I built that. I trusted it. I believed in that, and it still broke.
Hmm. So it's not about the choice to build the bridge, but judging herself for not predicting what could have happened when it broke.
Even though she had all the data that made it make sense, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And here's the thing. Regret can be felt by anybody who cares about a thing. Good-hearted people, however, suffer the long-term pain from it more. And unfortunately, like I mentioned before, good-hearted women carry the pain the longest. The regret of doing everything right, at least what they thought was right, and still getting hurt, or hurting somebody else, or losing something precious. She blames herself for not knowing what she couldn't have known. She punishes herself for not predicting what she could not have predicted. She rewrites the story as if she should have seen the cracks in the wood, the shift in the current, the storms on the horizon. But here's the truth, Sherry. She built the bridge with the best materials she had. She had made the decision with the clearest mind, and she acted with the purest heart that resonated inside of her. The damage didn't happen because she was wrong. The damage happened because life is unpredictable. And the most painful part, she forgets to give herself credit for the courage it took to build the bridge at all.
Mm. I hear you, but that is so hard to do because there is a gap between who you were and who you are, but you feel like the same person. So how do you understand that gap? And I think you're saying that healing is in the recognition that we did the best we could at the time and we're different now, but it's just so hard to do.
Oh, it absolutely is. And that's why it's a conversation that we're having today on this episode, because regret isn't telling her she failed. And it's one of the most powerful continuing emotions. And in this example, regret is not telling her that she failed. Regret is telling her she cared. Regret is telling her she tried. Regret is telling us all that we were brave enough to build something when staying on the shore really would have been easier. But the next time that she builds, because she will, she'll build with new wisdom, not old punishment. And Sherry, it's tough. Regret impacts, like we're talking about, everyone, but good-hearted people more than ever. I personally had a circumstance that impacted everyone I wanted to help. And I'm going to share with everybody one of my greatest regrets ever that has impacted me for a long time. I was asked back when I was still consulting to help build a company, Sherry. That company had an inside track on a telecommunications contract for the country of Sierra Leone. Now, as soon as this real estate broker that I used to work with when in banking, when he reached out to me and I heard the word Africa, I said, no way. It's got to be a trick. Because we've all heard those scams about Africa, right? But the head of the organization, this real estate broker I was mentioning, I'd worked with years. So I said I would listen to him. Well, he flew me to DC to be at a meeting. This broker only ever trusted me with his money and his financing, so he needed me to be there. I sat with the team. It was with a telecom engineer who had just returned from the country, a dear friend of the broker who was also there on the trip to the country, who happened to be the first cousin of the first lady of Sierra Leone. I don't even like saying the name of the country now. But there was an attorney there. They started talking about the inside track that they had for this new contract for the country. And because the expiring contract was with a Chinese company that had supposedly been stealing money. I sat there at the meeting. I still didn't believe it. Then the broker flew us all to Sierra Leone. We had a presidential official bring us through security. Then we had a presidential motorcade, Sherry, bring us to a 5-star hotel, probably the only one there. The flight was late, like by 4 hours, and the president had the entire kitchen staff for the entire hotel stay late to feed our group 5-pound lobsters. I still didn't believe it. Then we went to the president the next day. Then we met the first lady. Then we met with the minister of telecommunications. Then with the minister of tourism. We saw everything we needed to see. We saw the network set up. The engineer that was there met with the mobile providers who would be paying us. We went home. Now I was cautiously optimistic. We submitted preliminary paperwork for the bidding process. We went back one more time to the country, got the memorandum of understanding. Now I was really getting interested, Sherry. We completed the process and we won the bid to build the new process and in the whole system and be the tax collector for the mobile networks. Then we went back one more time to sign all the documents and set up our Sierra Leone office and appoint a representative there. And the money began to be deposited in the account for our office there. And the bank, per instructions, would get the money and send that appropriate percentage to the government. The staffing for the office and the overhead was deducted on a monthly basis. And then something happened. The representative for the first lady was magically added to the bank account illegally. We sought counsel. There was no one that would touch the case because they were all afraid of the president, who'd allegedly harmed oppositional opponents. End result is we saw $0 come back to the states, not a flippin' penny. I almost slipped there. No one here was paid a cent. But Sherry, once I was certain, I told 5 of the favorite people in my world, and because of the ability to invest and really get good returns, 4 of them invested. I metered out every possibility that I thought was a problem. I just never thought the president and the first lady of a country would steal. I'd accounted for every protection I could imagine in every other area. I even got the president to let me take a picture of his passport, which I still have to prove that it was him. And a friend of 30 years lost money. A relative of mine lost money. A sister from another mister that is a dear friend lost money. And my wife and I lost everything we invested. And the broker lost over $1 million. Sherry, I get near panic attacks when I'd hear the name of the country soon after that, when everything started to go to hell, and was absolutely beside myself when the president's son was arrested entering England with a duffel bag filled with $100 bills. Look it up. Was absolutely disgusted. And one of those relatives still to this day thinks I stole from them. I'm telling you what, that is a regret that I've had for years. And it is something that I have had to work with to be able to, every time it comes up, like we're talking about here, I have to say, I did all I could do to try to figure out and protect, but the result doesn't change.
I'm so sorry that happened to you. And as I'm listening to your story, though, I feel like that one is a little harsher because it's not just regret for yourself, but regret for other people that got hurt.
Oh, absolutely.
So how do you rectify that?
Frankly, I don't give a rat's tail about all the money that my wife and I lost. I really don't. I care about the people who joined me in that I love so deeply. And one of those is a relationship that I have lost and will never recover. You see, because regret steals presence. It steals joy. It steals self-trust. And in that example that I used, Sherry, that was and will be the last time that I'll ever do any consulting in that manner to help build a company, because it no longer is worth the risk to me. Regret steals the ability to receive good things because we feel we don't deserve them sometimes, and as especially with good-hearted women. Regret becomes a kind of a quiet belief, like I can't trust myself, I make bad choices, or I ruin things. And that belief becomes the emotional cage that we can live in. And every time I hear the name, I hear the continent, I have to remind myself, I did everything I possibly could. I have to not only try to forgive myself for what I could not have known and done everything that I could, but I have to hope that others can forgive me.
I mean, I can see that. You wouldn't trust your decisions or pursue opportunities now out of fear for making another mistake, not just in your situation, but anything like that. It's a it's a story that becomes who you believe you are.
Exactly. And if we don't do something about it, regret becomes our new identity. And once regret becomes our identity, a good-hearted woman stops choosing herself. She stops dreaming. She stops taking risks. She stops believing she's worthy of a life that feels good. And in my example, that impacted me there and made me focus solely on doing what I knew without the need to have anyone else be able to help good-hearted women, and focus solely on my coaching of an individual to help them be the she that she was meant to be, and to heck with building companies.
You know, you have talked to me before in our coaching about the differences between regret and responsibility. Is there a difference there?
Yeah, there really is. Regret really kind of says, I should have known differently. But responsibility says, now that I know better, I will. Regret looks always backwards. Responsibility looks forward. And when we have some of that new knowledge, we now have the ability to apply it in our future if we can, quote unquote, forgive ourselves for the past. Regret keeps a woman stuck in a moment that no longer exists, and it does it for everybody. The responsibility helps anybody build a life that does.
Hmm. That sounds really powerful. And this is always the part of our episodes where I get really excited. So, what you're saying is instead of living in the why did I do that, we can start asking ourselves, what do I want to do differently moving forward?
And one additional question, Sherry, because you're so spot on with that. There's one additional question I pose to every single one of my coaching clients. And when it comes to that subject that I mentioned before of my example, I have to remind myself one other question. What could I have done differently based on what I knew at the time? And with good hearted women and good hearted people, the answer almost always is nothing,
Hmm.
because regret is the emotional signal that you're ready to live differently now. Okay. And meaning that you cared at one point and did differently only because different data or how we felt about our own value at the time. Maybe in that example that we didn't speak up. You know what I mean?
Hmm. I think you hit something for me too, what we felt about our own value at the time, because I have made decisions in the past that maybe I knew weren't right, but my value wasn't enough to make anything, to make a different decision at the time. So I know women who have carried regret for years, maybe even decades. So, how do you begin to release this in a healthy way? I mean, especially what you've dealt with. So, how do you begin to let that go? Is it the question that you just said? What could I have done differently?
Well, it starts with that. I'm going to reference a number of clients that I've had over the years where a good hearted woman would say, well, why couldn't I have seen the red flags of this relationship? I would have avoided years of turmoil and trauma. The end result is, based on how she felt about herself at the time, that's what she was seeking without her knowledge, to kind of appease the desired value that she felt that she would receive, or what she unconsciously felt she deserved. So some of the steps that I'll teach my clients kind of start with, we have to separate the past self from the current self. That's the number one thing. We are not who we were. So we have to stop judging ourselves and our past self with today's wisdom. That's one of the first things that I share with my clients. And then the second thing is, I ask, what did that version of you need that you didn't have? Like that, the one that pops into my mind is a woman meeting a man in a restaurant and ended up being in a long-term relationship that was absolutely abusive. Well, at that time, she did not have the value that she deserved better. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Compassion really dissolves regret when we are able to really understand that there's a difference between past and present self. And then we have to identify the lesson that regret is trying to teach. Regret really is a teacher, and it's not a punishment like you mentioned earlier. It's a teacher, and good-hearted people really get that lesson a lot from regret. And then we have to ask, how can I honor this regret through action? We have to turn regret into responsibility. I have to be able to say, yeah, okay, I made those decisions. It impacted me or it impacted others, but I couldn't have done anything more. Or my previous self was not ready to see what my worth required. That's so common for good-hearted women, Sherry.
Yeah.
And then we have to release the fantasy of the alternate life. We can't live with the sense of imagining what should have occurred. We can only live in the one that we're building now. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does. It does. I still don't think it's easy to do, though.
Oh, hell no. I'm sorry for using that word, but this is the process, and it takes a long time, and we have to be able to give ourselves permission to move forward,
Mm.
because especially for good-hearted women, regret loses its power when we stop trying to rewrite the past and start accepting what happened with the good intentions that we had at the time. Because good-hearted women, Sherry, you know this better than anybody, or as much as anybody. Once you're compassionate, you're considerate, and you're kind, you're already considering others. Well, when it comes to regret, when we're making decisions that impact others, those decisions are almost always based on wanting to impact positively self and others. We include others in opportunities, or we are looking for, in a relationship type of thing where there are regrets. We have to look back and say, this is what she was looking for then, but it's no longer what we're looking for now.
Yeah. I think I always had to remind myself of that through my healing process too, because I just want to beat that old person up. And it just, so I feel like for people who are listening right now, if you're still whispering to yourself, you should have known better. I hope this conversation can really help you see this story differently, because it's time to not let that be the title of your life, regret, and just let it become a chapter.
I love how you put that. And there's one thing that I'd love everybody listening to be able to do is to put ourself back in that moment, whether or not it was the first moment that we met that person that became an abusive partner, whether or not it was an opportunity that we involved others in. We have to go back to that moment and be able to really say to ourselves, we were good then, we were looking to help those around us, or in the red flags that we missed, be able to say to ourselves, there's no way I could have seen that red flag where I was. And this is so common in relationships with my clients, Sherry, when they're um, getting out of a traumatic relationship, because they, like you said, they want to beat that old self up
Mm.
and say, what the heck were you thinking?
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, we have to acknowledge that we didn't know about our emotional self then. And the only reason that we have regret is because we've been able to see the impact. But if we go back at that moment, based on who we were, or based on the information that we had, would we make any different decision now if we only had the knowledge then? And the answer is no. And so we have to be able to say the only reason that is a regret is because of the consequence and the outcome. In my example that I used, if the president and first lady had not stolen that money, everybody would have been happy and I would have made a great decision, right?
Yeah.
So that's the circumstance. We have to be allowed to forgive the version of who we were and be really able to realize we were doing the best we could while we were building that bridge. And ladies, you are allowed to stop punishing yourself now for not being then the woman you have now eventually become. You're allowed to step into a life that reflects who you are now and not who you were then or what you had no way of knowing.
Hmm. And I have to remind myself that, because I can become paralyzed, or not necessarily now, but after I came out of all my stuff, I became paralyzed to make decisions or move forward. So you said it earlier, I have to remind myself that I am good-hearted and my decisions are grounded in good values, and I always take in other people's feelings and emotions when I'm doing that too.
Love that.
Yeah.
Ladies, it is impossible being a good-hearted woman. It is impossible. And for all good-hearted people, it is impossible for you to intentionally harm anybody else.
Yeah.
The consequence that may impact others or yourself is always going to have been because you cared and because you were working with the best intentions you possibly had.
Yeah.
You like that, Sherry?
I've really internalized that during our coaching, and that really did help me move forward. And I do feel like at some point you have to decide that you've carried this long enough, and not because it didn't matter, but because your future life still does. And the people who you love deserve the best version of you, and so do you. So you have to decide it's long enough.
Yes.
You know what? It just reminded me of a Maya Angelou quote, and it really fits. Forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it.
Oh, oh my God. Can you say that one more time?
Forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it. Love her. Love her. She has so many good quotes.
I absolutely love that. I think I'm going to put that up on our website, captivecoachingandempowerment.com. Sherry, as always, thank you for doing this podcast with me. I always say I wouldn't want to have done it and do it with anybody else. And ladies, remember, regret is not your enemy. It's your invitation and a reminder that if you didn't care, you wouldn't have the ability to regret. I want you to be good to yourself by realizing that your caring, your consideration, and your compassion was the original source for the regret. And I don't know about you, but we need as many good-hearted women in this world as possible, empowered with all the strength that you have in you, because you impact positively every single person that is in your world. And if you diminish yourself, or any of us diminish ourselves from regret that was done with greatest intentions, then we limit the number of people that we can help. And
Yeah.
as usual, Sherry, you and I are here with Her Discovered Power to help all of our good-hearted women be the she that you were meant to be. Sherry, we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for doing this with me.
Great episode. Thank you, David.
Thank you.